minutes.
Perfect.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Johnny Manziel thing. So now, I talked about a decent
1 second,
night.
Bull. 1 second, Bull. We got to go to break first.
Okay.
Before we get into Johnny Manziel, I just want to remind you at this time to subscribe to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. Make sure you go to our page, hit that like button, ring that bell to stay up to date with all the latest news, all the latest information, all the latest alerts, like our podcast, Behind the Glass. Shout out to everybody who pulled up yesterday. We had over 2,000 live views. Our podcast did over 10,000 views yesterday. We had super chats. We had new members joining. Shout out to everybody who pulled up and supported. McNuggets was out there with the guns out. It was crazy. It was wild, man. So make sure you subscribe to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show.
Apparently nobody knew you had guns.
Yeah, I don't know what my reputation was prior to yesterday, but yeah.
But it's changed. People
So,
think
G, you were the
more
one
manly now.
You were the one who didn't watch it. It was a lot that came out. This is for you all. You know,
Tyvus just said there was nothing out of there.
No, to me it was a lot. I enjoyed it, but you know when I watched it, it was clear that there were a lot of red flags with Johnny Manziel, and yet the Browns drafted him anyway. And I find it hard to believe that they did not do their homework before drafting him. So it led me to believe, okay, this was only to sell tickets. How far have the Browns organization come from that moment to now, in your opinion?
I don't believe that they only did it to sell tickets. That doesn't make any sense because if you knew he was going to be bad, the Browns sell tickets anyway. The Browns sell out every game every year. I don't. I think it was Jimmy Haslam. Let me be a little nice about it. I shouldn't be too mean. He is a shit ass owner. Okay, he sucks. He's a terrible owner. He's done almost nothing well. He walks like he just took a shit and didn't wipe himself. Okay, Jimmy Haslam's a bad owner. He meddles. He pits guys against each other. He don't know what the hell he's doing. The Browns have to try to win in spite of him. It's not going to change. He's not going to all of a sudden let guys do their jobs or be a better owner. He's a bad owner, but you can win with a bad owner but it's just more to overcome. So you got to deal with that. I know there'll be 25% of our audience that'll try to convince me he's a good owner. You're wrong. I'm right. He's a bad owner. Okay? There's really no debating that. So you have to overcome his stupidity and his meddling. And that's what happened with Johnny, is the owner just said, I want this guy. I'm fired up. He's Johnny Football. And I'm sure the football people did not want anything to do with Johnny Manziel, G, because there were all these red flags. All you had to do was talk to any coach with the Texas A&M system, and I'm sure the coaches. I remember when Johnny got drafted, we had Cliff Kingsbury on our radio show, and he talked about the fact that he basically said, I don't remember word for word exactly what he said, but he basically said Johnny doesn't practice much. He doesn't work hard. He said
it in the documentary too.
Right, but this is years later. Now, at the time, it was mind-blowing because you never heard a coach say that about a rookie, ever. So there's zero doubt that this move was 100% Jimmy Haslam. Again, I don't think it was selling tickets. I just think he overrode his football people because he was excited, like a fan, about Johnny Football, and it was extremely foolish because the guy had no business being drafted in the NFL.
This is very easy. This is why history is so pivotal. When I got into sports, they told you can't talk about politics or you can't talk about certain things, and we want to talk about sports. But what people don't realize is that everything that goes on in these organizations is political. It is. This was a political move. When you look at the Cleveland Browns back then, look at the traditional quarterbacks that they had. They tried to go with the All-American boy and Colt McCoy. They tried to go with Brandon Whedon. The savvy 30-year-old, we'll draft him. They tried to go with Colt McCoy, the down south good old boy. They tried to go every which way. They tried to get MAC conference guy, Charlie Fry, he's from here. They went and got the backup quarterback. Let's get Jeff Garcia in here. They tried every which way they could to get a quarterback, and it all failed. Just like when we talk about our political system here in the United States. When people get fed up, the pendulum tends to swing. You go from really, 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 really over here liberal to way over here conservative, over the top conservative. So you can see that play out in our political system. People were tired. They felt like they was taking L's. They don't have any pension. The job market sucks. They feel they're overlooked. So they're looking for something. They're looking for somebody that stands for them or to give them a feeling, not action, but a feeling. Johnny Manziel gave you a feeling.
That's right.
He made you feel like, hey, who cares about the establishment? The establishment got us all these L's all these years. We tried the clean-cut quarterback, but maybe let's try this guy. And at least he tells us how he feels, and at least he's real about his party and while everybody else is phony about it. And he goes out there and he plays with certain exuberance. And he makes a couple plays and he makes you believe it. That is why they took Johnny Manziel. And it rubbed off on the ownership. And the owner is looking for any answer swimming. And you know what they always say? When you're swimming, the worst thing you can do is try to save somebody who's drowning. Because they end up pulling you down. Because they're panicking. And that was a panic move.
It's crazy that when you go back to the 2014 NFL draft, as bad as Johnny Football was as an NFL player and as bad as the draft pick that turned out to be, it wasn't even the Browns' biggest mistake of the first round. Like, Justin Gilbert was the 9th overall pick that year. And he was a worse NFL player than Johnny Football was.
No, he was. I mean, they were equally bad. No.
Justin Gilbert started, 2 games?
Yeah, real quick, the 10 guys drafted directly after Gilbert all made at least one Pro Bowl.
Yeah, but they were both complete shit.
But I'm just saying, it wasn't like that scouting department that year nailed one pick.
Yeah.
It was two colossal failures.
Yeah.
The thing that stood out to me most about the Johnny Football doc, he admitted, I'm not a football player that likes to party. I'm a frat boy who happens to be really good at football. And to be open, and obviously in hindsight now, but to be open about that and to realize who he was in that time, and I mentioned this on your podcast last night, Bull, Johnny Football came to prevalence as soon as Twitter became a real thing. And Johnny Football's rise to stardom, to the levels he reached, were exactly in line with when social media started becoming a thing and amping guys up to levels they had never seen before. I don't blame, or I understand, I guess, why Johnny Manziel thought he was on top of the world when he's hanging out with LeBron James and Drake. Mm-hmm. And he's the coolest guy at some of the coolest parties in the world. He's walking into parties and celebs are asking him for pictures. He's just a little kid from San Antonio, Texas. It's never been like that. And he was amped up to a level that it felt like, at least in his mind, he couldn't be knocked off that perch because he never had to work hard in his life. He was just naturally good at football. He was able to do football and party at the same time. And when it came down to that next level, he had no interest in ever really putting in the work. He never, and he said it, I never really loved football in that sense. I never was willing to work hard. He watched 0 hours of film. He didn't practice. Like, that wasn't who Johnny Football was. He was a frat boy who was really good at football. And once it got to that next level where he had to put in the work to compete, he wasn't willing to do it. And that's sad because it seems like he could have been.
I don't know that he ever could have been good. If he had worked hard, maybe he had been serviceable. I guess we'll never.
I'm saying, but look at what he was without trying. Had he put in a little bit of effort,
To be, you got to think about it like this: to be a quarterback in the NFL and not know any of your playbook, to watch no film work, and to not even practice that much, and be high or drunk 90% of the time, you have to have talent. Like, that's crazy. That's like saying you're gonna throw touchdown passes against guys who do this for a living. Yeah. He doesn't even know the plays. He's just running around out there, which is the crazy part about it. I remember the first time we played against the Bengals.
Oh my God!
And they just it was one of the most. It was disrespectful. Like, he just didn't know where to go with the rock. He was getting sacked. They was doing this little dance over top of his face. I just think he's a guy who, to me, he had mental issues. Like,
clearly,
what he was diagnosed with, like, being bipolar.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in the NFL, when you go back and look at it, there's a lot of people in the NFL that meet that same description of, hey, I got the most money I ever had. I'm rich. I'm Johnny Manziel. I won in the first round. And then he says, I walked on the field and was even more miserable than I was before, which was crazy.
Yeah. Go ahead, Earl.
A couple things. First, we got a super chat. Devoid our Changel. I don't know what the hell that says, but He says Haslam is the owner lady from the movie Major League. I got a comment about that, but boy, correct me if I'm wrong. I remember listening to your radio show at the time, and you all were talking about the Browns had hired a firm to kind of help them try to figure out which direction they should go in the draft, and the consensus was like Odell Beckham and Teddy Bridgewater. Yet somehow we ended up with Justin Gilbert and
honestly,
Johnny
I don't
Manziel.
remember that. I remember him hiring some firms. I don't remember specifically. Now that you say it, it's kind of striking a chord. And in fairness, Teddy Bridgewater hasn't had a good career either.
No.
But I'd much rather have had him than
They
Johnny Manziel.
Teddy Bridgewater's still playing. Johnny Manziel just checked out of rehab.
Teddy
for
Bridgewater's a
second.
backup quarterback, but he's a good, again, he wasn't the answer either.
Yeah.
But at least he's a career quality backup. And obviously Odell,
I look at the parallels very, very similarly. Like, along the lines of the pendulum swings, when they went back and they drafted Baker Mayfield, it was still some of the same stuff, like, but to a lesser degree. And so if you look at the two most polarizing quarterbacks in the city, and people will say they divided the city. It was a Brian Hoyer versus Manziel, and people used to argue every day about it. Then it was Baker Mayfield versus whoever it is on the other side of the spectrum. People yelled about it, or it was.
I think that Baker was more just you believe in him or you don't.
Yes,
more than another quarterback specifically. Until Watson got traded.
Right,
over.
right.
Yeah.
So, and people love Baker because once again, you tried it the other way. Like the other way was like, hey, we'll go through the draft, we'll bring some people in, and it just never really worked. So,
and in fairness, Baker had some success, of course,
and he did,
unlike Johnny.
And he was in his playbook, and he never was outwardly
a
alcoholic. None of that stuff.
So the one thing in the Johnny docket didn't touch on that I think is a big reason Manziel ended up being a first-round pick and the reason he was the Heisman winner that year, Mike Evans was so good that season at A&M, and Mike Evans bailed Johnny's ass out. Now, this is not taking Johnny was unbelievable in his own right.
Yeah.
Mike Evans was so good and Mike Evans is still playing, by the way. He's the only receiver in NFL history with 9 straight 1,000-yard seasons starting his career. He was so good. You mentioned Baker. And, the parallel, I know you texted us, bigger mistake, Baker or Manziel. I'm not sure if you thought that was, do you think anyone would argue Baker? It's definitely Manziel was the bigger mistake.
Well, I would actually, to G's defense, I would actually argue Baker was the bigger mistake because with Manziel, who else was I going to draft at that point? What quarterback? Was there a quarterback taken later in that draft? That was any good?
I can't remember. That was a weak quarterback draft.
There was
Blake
no
Bortles
quarterbacks
was the
in
first
that draft.
quarterback off the draft.
Obviously, Manziel's the far worse. Baker Mayfield, if he wanted to and had a good attitude, could last in the league as a backup forever.
I call Baker a bigger mistake because you got two quarterbacks that you didn't take.
You could have Lamar or Josh Allen.
You can look at misses. You can look at misses however you want.
Yes.
I think the reality situation is it's a bigger miss on Manziel because you avoided every red flag humanly possible under the sun. His workout, he was throwing routes to his agent and his guy.
But again, Mike, I don't believe. Obviously, I don't know this with 100% certainty. I don't believe that the football people had anything to do with drafting Manziel. I think it was 100% a Jimmy Haslam move. So I don't think they missed the red flags. I think Jimmy didn't care about the red flags.
If that is true, then obviously that changes the equation. But I'm just looking at pick versus pick.
Right.
Baker, like you said, at least Baker could be a competent NFL quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, if Baker had a better attitude, he could be a career backup.
Yeah. So Manziel, I think, had no chance at ever having a sustained career in the NFL.
The reason I say even mention this is because it stung a little bit more with Baker because he came after the 1-31. Right. So you sat through hell.
He's supposed to be the savior.
And he was like, okay, we finally got it. We good. And then when it progressed and it wasn't, and what ended up costing you was this. That happened, and then it took you 3 first-round picks.
Right.
After that.
If they had now listen, who knows? Maybe Josh Allen wouldn't have been as good here. We'll never know, right?
Right.
But if they drafted Josh Allen, who knows what this whole history of this franchise could have been totally different. Plus, you would have had all those, as you said, you would have had those 3 first-round picks.
I mean, or you
now, in fairness, there weren't that many people here, myself included, saying draft Josh Allen.
Me either.
I didn't believe. I wasn't a Josh Allen believer. I like Lamar. I actually like Lamar.
I like Lamar,
but I embarrassingly like Josh Rosen.
In hindsight,
total
right?
piece of garbage. What's that?
Well, you remember? I got a question. In hindsight, so everybody remember when John Dorsey took over as the Browns general manager. And before he had even took over, he had just left the Chiefs. He was doing a lot of independent scouting, etc. And I'm just wondering now, it seems like he had already predetermined that Baker Mayfield was going to be his pick. And knowing what we know about how John Dorsey went about certain business, I wonder if he even did any due diligence on the other quarterbacks that was coming out. Because we heard Baker Mayfield's name attached to John Dorsey literally the moment that he took this job.
I'm sure they did
I'm
their
sure
due
he did
diligence.
his due diligence, but I guess you never know, right? Teams passed on Patrick Mahomes. The Chicago Bears saw Patrick Mahomes and Mitch Trubisky, and they took Mitch Trubisky.
Crazy.
Mitch Trubisky, like how much? That's nightmares.
Drafting a quarterback is the hardest science in the entire realm of sports.
It is.
The way we evaluate it is impossible. No skill is like purely translatable. It's so mental. I mean, look at the hit rate of first-round quarterbacks, and we're seeing more and more drafted every year. It's like 37 to 38%.
Is the hit rate any hot? The only reason but part of that is
because you look
teams
at
reach on quarterbacks because
lot.
they're so desperate for a quarterback.
Fair.
That sometimes they'll take a guy who's not worthy of a first-round pick.
Like-
where you're less likely to do that at another position.
like the dude from Florida this year. What's his name?
Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
He's not like off just playing, and I didn't see him
Right.
play a lot. He's tantalizing. He got everything you want in a quarterback. You look like Cam Newton running away from people, like it. But what you got to understand is when you get to that next level, it's so different when you talk about quarterbacks. I be talking to Bernie, and this messed up. Bernie Kosar might be one of the smartest football
my
people
God,
I've ever. And I watch stuff, and he'll tell me about different things and how I'm gonna move with the safety, and I'm gonna do this and call this. Like, you understand that Bernie was calling his own plays. You know how crazy that is. That means he's calling the run plays, the pass plays. He's doing sequencing. Think about that.
He's basically telling the Belichick to go F himself.
Hey, yep. And even the fact that he did that, but think about it. If you got a quarterback that was doing the equivalent of what Kevin Stefanski is doing behind that big sheet, and but he has to go out and actually do it.
Who did Kansas City trade with to get to the 10th pick?
I don't remember. Was it the Browns?
No, the Browns took Myles Garrett first that year.
Right. That's right.
Was it Buffalo?
I don't remember.
I didn't.
Watson went before Mahomes too.
No,
yeah.
they traded up to take Mahomes, and Watson went 2 picks later.
Oh,
so they
Watson
traded
went
up to
after?
10. The Browns was at 12, and then the Browns traded down to 25.
Yeah, that's true. The Browns could have taken Watson or not Mahomes. Well, they could have. I mean, look at as great as Myles Garrett is, they still should have taken Mahomes.
You should have took
number
Patrick
one,
Mahomes in hindsight. Yeah.
right? I mean,
That's crazy.
as great as Myles Garrett is, and the pick was one of the few hits they've made, it still ultimately was the wrong pick because they should have taken Mahomes. Every team should. I mean, it's crazy.
They missed on him.
How did we not?
The
how
Bills.
did everybody? And by the way, I wasn't here saying draft Patrick Mahomes.
Nope.
I'm not gonna be a phony about it.
I didn't.
I'm going to be totally honest.
It was the Bills, by the way.
Okay.
I'm gonna be totally honest with you. I remember the year before that was the year we took what was it? Deshaun Kaiser.
Oh God.
And I knew the Browns was gonna suck. I knew like we didn't have any quarterbacks that had career starts. And I remember telling my cousin I was okay with it. I am not being a phony when I tell you this. I've been a huge fan of Deshaun Watson since he was at Clemson. And I was like, the Browns gonna suck. They're gonna have the number 1 pick, and you can just take Deshaun Watson number 1 overall. I didn't know much about Patrick
Well, that
Mahomes.
would have been good. I mean, certainly the first choice should have been Mahomes. The second choice should have been Watson. And then again, we all love that Myles Garrett's here. It's hard to complain about a Myles Garrett pick.
You
But
take Mahomes every time. Real quick,
Yes.
you ready for the trade details of this trade?
yeah,
And I only say because there's one very familiar name in here.
Yeah.
The Bills traded the 10th overall pick to Kansas City,
yeah.
which turned into Mahomes, for a 2018 first-round pick, Rashawn Evans, a 2017 first-round pick, Tre'Davious White, and a 2017 third-round pick, John Johnson III,
That's funny.
who then was traded to LA.
By the way, if I remember correctly, the pick before Patrick Mahomes was the Bengals, who overall have drafted very well the last few years. But that year, they drafted John Ross.
I
One pick
remember
before
that. I
Patrick
remember
Mahomes.
that.
Oh, my
He
God.
never played.
Never. He sucked. When he did play, couldn't hold on to the ball.
He was cold and mad.
He was basically Anthony Schwartz, except in the first round.
Man, that's crazy.
that 4-1 speed was real.
Oh my God.
Yeah, this draft was kind of loaded.
John Ross did go 9, right?
He did go 9.
Yeah.
McCaffrey was in that draft. Jamal Adams, Marshawn Lattimore, Hassan Reddick, Watson, Marlon Humphrey, Jonathan Allen, Evan Ingram, Tre'Davious White, T.J. Watt, Budda Baker, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Juju, Alvin Kamara, Cooper Kupp, Chris Godwin, Kareem Hunt, Shaquille Griffin, Trey Hendrickson.
There's a lot of talent there.
A lot of
Holy
good drafts.
cow.
George Kittle, late round pick.
What
We
was
got
the Browns'
Myles
second
Garrett,
pick
David
in that?
Njoku.
When they traded down.
It was David Njoku and no, it was Jabril Peppers. Then David Njoku.
David Njoku and Jabril Peppers, yeah.
They took Jabril Peppers
Yeah, he was a waste.
at 25 and then Njoku at 29.
Right.
They took
Yeah.
Njoku 1 pick before T.J. Watt. They could have came out of that draft with Myles Garrett and T.J. Watt.
Can you imagine?